I know what you're thinking. Oh god, it's another Gigs video and he's gonna blow up my eardrums with his shit tier audio again. That's where you're wrong, kiddo. I listened to the YouTube comment section, which not exactly is a great idea all the time, but this time it was a great idea because now I have a new mic, pop filter, and everything. And today we're going to be talking about Steel Division 2 and what it's bringing to the table when compared to the games of the past. But before we head into that, I have to clear some things up. I don't want the Steel Division series to die because if the Steel Division series dies, then Wargame dies, and no one's going to have a place to rant about their nationalistic views other than poll now because War Chat would get shut down, and that would be just terrible. And imagine exposing those people to the general populace. The YouTube comment section also said that my claims are baseless and that I'm a complete moron. Well, I have experience working in the digital asset creation industry, and I worked for a pretty well-known CGI company, and I can tell you that if our staff got cut even 5 to 10 people, it would critically impact the progress and the quality of current projects. There's so much work, and that even if you lose a small part of your team, it hits you really, really hard. And a lot of people don't understand that because there is an entire army behind the scenes doing modeling, doing AI programming, doing all sorts of other things that you don't really notice or you take for granted in an actual game. And the reason I make such a big fuss about this is that there is a huge culture of crunch and just burnout is so rampant in the video games industry and the creative industry. People get into this industry because it's their passion and they love it. And they end up leaving the industry to go work in other sectors because it burns them out and it kills their will to pursue things creatively. And that's pretty horrible to see happen to people. And you don't end up in labor court and you don't have half of your company strike if there are not some sort of culture issues within your company. And I really hope that gets fixed because I like the games that Eugen makes because no one else really makes games like this anymore because most people have deemed them not financially feasible or worth the time for such a niche market. So enough of my rambling, and let's get into some of the new features that are coming to Steel Division 2 and how they compare to the games of the past. So the single player looks a lot better than Wargame and the previous Steel Division 1944. This slide is actually really important because it shows you a battalion and the units that make up said battalion, and looks like you then build a division with multiple battalions, and all those units are able to be called in onto the battlefield to do whatever your bidding is. It really looks like we're getting Rome Total War's movement system and campaign system tied into the Iris Zoom game engine. So it sounds pretty good in theory, and if you don't know what the Iris Zoom game engine is, that's Eugen's own game engine that all the games it has made in the last 5 years has ran on. And that's all we have for the first Dev Diary, essentially. Dev Diary 2 starts off with showing the new tactical interface, and it looks really similar to Wargame. The interesting thing to note is that this T-34 has AP shells and HE shells, and they are different, and they're toggleable. And the orders tab in the bottom right-hand corner looks almost identical to Wargame, which is kind of ironic. But there's also the addition of the Hunt order, which is interesting because it looks like there might be some sort of AI tied into the system now, so that you can just put units on a path, and then they will go out and hunt to kill a bunch of fascists. Another interesting thing to note is in the top left corner, you have a deployment tab that is extremely similar to Wargame and vaguely similar to Steel Division, but it looks like it has the same tabs we know and love, but a little more standardized. So it looks like it's a great change in the right direction. So another very interesting thing in here is that they talk about the changes to critical damage models and how armor works in the game, and it looks like they're going back to basically the Wargame damage model where you can crit optics, you can crit treads, you can crit transmissions, and sometimes Panthers even crit their own transmissions, which is unfortunate, but it's a fact of life. And so that about wraps up the Dev Diary number 2. Holy shit! It's the Wargame Armoury, and it's in Steel Division 2, and it actually looks pretty good. So like looking at this screen, you can see all the wonderful tanks you can just send out in hordes towards the Germans, who are probably going to be lacking in tanks, so they're going to have to kill a copious amount of these tanks. You also see things like armor penetration values, you see armor values, You see how many AP shells, how many HE shells it gets, and then you also see a bunch of other data in the bottom here, which is its speed, its road speed, and its stealth, and its optics, which is really important when picking a unit for your deck and your engagement. Your fourth dev diary goes over the single player campaign and how your generals will function and what kind of units you're going to get. You basically have 3 different types. They're either assault, armor, or support, and they're kind of self-explanatory as to what they do and how you can call them in. And that's basically how your single player campaign units are going to be structured. In Dev Diary number 5, we got a new Conquest mode, which seems to be a hybrid of the Steel Division territory system and the old Wargame zone system. And it says a typical map is going to have 12 objectives per side, and that it depends on the number of players and such as to how many objectives it will have. But those will effectively give you a tick, and the more those points you accrue, the faster you defeat your opponents. It's very similar to the Conquest system that was in Wargame. Dev Diary 6 and 7 seem to pertain mainly to the single player mode and how your action points are used to initiate combat, to move around the map, and to position your units effectively. It's very much like Total War again, and you get action points and you get a specified amount per turn, and those can be used to move around the map, to resupply, or to initiate combat. So Dev Diary 8 says that you will get every single division that you had in Steel Division 1 or Steel Division 1944 in Steel Division 2. So that means they've all been retooled and ported into the new game engine that they have made for Steel Division 2, which is good. I mean, you're reusing old assets, but at the same time, it adds more flavor to the game, and it adds more nations to play in multiplayer. Dev Diary 9 was a big surprise. It looks like we're getting buildable fortifications that will be implemented into the map, and it is going to be part of the new breakthrough mode, and it looks pretty good so far. I mean, it looks interesting. It adds another dynamic to the game, and it's going to influence how you play in your assaults. So in retrospect, I'm sorry for the piss poor audio quality in my previous videos, and I'm working to improve that on a daily basis via better mastering, better quality mics, and just better production quality in general. It was pretty horrible now that I listened to it in retrospect. Steel Division 2 is looking more promising than 1944 was. It looks like it is essentially the really screwed up love child of Wargame and Steel Division 1944. It looks like it addresses a lot of the problems with Steel Division 1944. The question will be, is the Wargame community going to be welcoming of this? I will most likely play it. I don't know if I'm going to pre-order it. I would like to play the beta, but I would also kind of like to see how things play out with the whole political side of things and the labor side of things. I'd like to support a community that continues to make tactical games and games that I enjoy, but at the same time I also work in the tech industry, so it's like I'm conflicted. I really like playing these games, but I also don't really like the industry's culture and the really nasty side of crunch and of burnout in the industry that has affected some of my peers. So to conclude, it looks like Steel Division 2 is getting a lot of revamps in the single player campaign category, and they all look pretty good. It looks like we're going to have a World War II Rome Total War game, which is awesome. I loved Rome Total War, and I love the Total War series in general, so if it captures that same type of feeling, that would be great. And while we still don't have any gameplay videos, even though they've been asking for pre-orders now for 2 to 3 months, it looks like the multiplayer side and the actual engagement side is going to be using Wargame's game engine, or at least a very similar version of that, because the Armoury system looks the same, the engagement range looks the same. So it looks like we're basically getting World War II Wargame, and they're junking a lot of the mechanics that were in Steel Division 1944 and replacing them with a lot of the mechanics that are more akin to what was in Wargame. So in my opinion, that's a great thing, and that'll make for better gameplay. And it looks like there are also some elements from 1944 that are still going to be present, which are going to improve the game. So it looks like a win-win in this situation. It also looks like we could have the building blocks for a game engine and a game system that could easily be ported into the Cold War era. You could easily have a game that's set in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and possibly even in the 80s. So that's really interesting as well, and that could fulfill some of the desires that the wargame community has been looking for the last 3 to 4 years. So once again, thanks for watching, and I'm sorry for subjecting you to the horrible audio in the past, and I only look to improve from here on out. If you're interested in more Wargame and possibly even more Steel Division content, feel free to check out my Twitch and also subscribe to my YouTube page. Thank you very much.